Let me start by saying, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And first, I apologize. We've delayed slightly, but it was out of our control. My name is Zuhra Yunus. I work for the BBC World Service, specifically Swahili Service. It's a language, for those who don't know, is spoken mostly in East and Central Africa. And I'm going to be moderating this discussion today. It gives me much pleasure to welcome you to this discussion, as it's also close to me because I am a woman, or you can call me a girl if you want to. And our topic is No Health Without Rights. Women and girls decide. I repeat, no health without rights. Women and girls decide. Just last week, it was Menstrual Hygiene Day. And as I said, I'm a journalist. We had a report from Uganda, which was about this young girl who was afraid to go to school because she was going menstruation periods. And she felt embarrassed. So what they're trying to do in that particular school was making reusable pads, which are affordable. As we're talking about health and girls, you can imagine how many girls are afraid or ashamed to go to school during their periods. Let's assume 7 days you don't go to school for a girl. How many girls don't go to school per month? And you can imagine the economic impact on that if they all drop school just because they're embarrassed to go to school. So I also interviewed a woman activist from Tanzania during that period who talked about a menstruation period and how important it is to talk about pads. And she said most girls don't go to school at that particular time. But her solution was pads should be tax-free by governments. And also for those organizations or companies that make pads should make it less expensive. So that's just one aspect of health for girls and women. There's so many others like FGM, forced marriages, and child trafficking. So before I introduce you to our keynote speakers, I just want to inform you that we have a maximum of 90 minutes. And what we're going to hear today is experience and kind of interventions they have made that are now yielding results. We're also going to talk about mainly, are we aware of ACE, SRHR, and how different actors could help to achieve broader agenda. So before that, let me just ask you one question. I believe most of you have already downloaded the app, EDD app. If you just take your mobile phones and go into that, I'll ask you one question. Do you know what the acronym SRHR means? Can you vote for that? Just say yes or no. Just say yes or no. I hope all of you are aware of how to use it. Hopefully. Yes or no? Whoa. So you do know what it means. 100%. Okay. Let's go to the second question. Quick one. What does SRHR mean to you, specifically? What does it mean to you? All right. Let's go to the other questions. Just a quick one. Just a quick one. Do you think that child early and forced marriages should be prevented? Yes or no? Do you think they should be prevented? Yes or no? Still thinking about that? I assumed it was straightforward. Yes or no? Do you think that child early and forced marriage should be prevented? Yes or no? No answers? No answers. Okay. Well, think about it. Just continue thinking about it while we continue with our discussion. Oh, yes, 30%. Oh, 50%. And no, half. Oh, we have a serious discussion today. Very serious discussion. Another one, now I'm getting excited. Do you think that universal access to healthcare for pregnant women and girls should be provided? Yes or no? Let's make it a little bit faster. Yes or no? This is interesting. Oh, yes, 72%, 72.7%, and no, 27.3%. At least, okay. And do you think safe abortion should be available? Yes or no? Safe abortion. Abortion has been a really huge topic these days. Don't forget the word safe abortion. That's what they're saying. Do you think it should be available? Ooh, yes. And last but not least, do you think that universal access to modern contraceptives should be guaranteed? Yes or no? Yes or no? Should it be guaranteed? Oh, yes, 94.1%. Now, at least now it seems that we all know what SRHR means. Let me start by introducing you to our keynote speakers who are in front of us, and I'll introduce the rest of the speakers later. So I'll start with the Minister of State and Republic of Senegal, Awa Marie-Coulsec. Thank you very much for joining us. We also have the Commissioner for the European Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development, Nevin Mamita. Thank you very much for coming. He's not here yet, he's over there. And we have Ms. Catarina Furtado, who is also over there. You'll see her soon, from UNFPA. She's a Goodwill Ambassador. So I'll start by welcoming the Minister of State, Republic of Senegal, Minister Awa Marie-Coulsec. Thank you very much. At the podium. Yes, please. Thank you.
I think it's better here. Good evening, I think it's what we say in English. And thank you for being with us. I would like just to share with you some figures showing us that we cannot accept anymore this type of situation. But also tell you why the Guttmacher-Lancet Commission has been set up. Let us go to this first slide, showing us more an issue of we have an unfinished agenda, but we can do it. Next, it is important to know that more than 45 million women are in a situation where we can say that in our developing world, we have no access or inadequate access to antenatal care. Some people can think it's unbelievable, but it exists. Next, we have also another figure I like a lot, is this more than 200 million women in our region want to avoid pregnancy, but they have no access to contraceptive methods, particularly the modern one. Next, another point very important is that we have also a problem of infertility in couples. And it is 180 million couples who are also living with this problem of infertility. Next, what is shocking also is 1 in 3 women worldwide experience gender-based violence, often for intimate person, intimate partner. Some can say why we are in this situation. I think that these are just figures, but behind all these figures you have people, and particularly women or girls. And it is why we need to change our mindset, and we need to reinforce what has been done for a long time, but we need to do more. But also to understand that to advance health, we must advance rights. But also, it is why we need a bold agenda on sexual and reproductive health and rights. This is just to set the scene and show that we need to do something. And it is why this group of Guttmacher and Lancet came together to try to put this on a new agenda and support all the agenda we had before and be able to do more. Next, it is the recommendation this commission has made. First of all, we need actions, not only speak or say it is not possible, is unacceptable. We have done it. What we need is actions. The first one is to have a new definition of what we call sexual and reproductive health rights and rights. We need to know more on that, and maybe in the panel we will go through that. But more is important is that we need an holistic approach. We need not to look at one side only, but to all the possibilities, and we will see that when we look at the issue, we can go for abortion, to reproductive cancer, to other things, vulnerable population, etc. We need to really grab all and not look also only at some points like health, reproductive health is, or sexual rights is not only to do it, but also to have pleasure. This is also part of the definition. We need also an essential package. When we look at it, we are speaking of what? We need a package on that. We need to look at what are the gaps in programming, but also identified evidence gaps. Look also to address social, cultural, legal, and economic barriers. We need to know that we have a lot of barriers, so we need to look at them and take action also on that. But also secure sustainable financing. If we don't have money to do our work and to work with communities, with NGOs, with government, with private sector, everybody needs to be involved. We need also more financial support. But also, we need to be accountable. Accountability, I heard that from the panel before us, is not only to say the government needs to be accountable, the international community needs to be accountable, civil society needs to be accountable, communities need to be accountable. Accountability needs to be put for everybody. And this will help us now to have more results. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Awa, who will be with us till the end. And now I welcome the European Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development, Mr. Nevin Mamita. You're welcome.
Well, Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear colleagues and friends, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this important discussion on women's and girls' health and rights. I'm here because this is not only a priority for the European Union, but something which I feel very strongly about personally. We all know that we know what it means when these fundamental rights are denied. It means that by the time I finish this short speech, somewhere in the world, another 5 women will have lost their lives through complications in pregnancy or childbirth, and 20 more will suffer lifelong pain or disability. This is something which, as a society, we simply should not tolerate. It's not just a woman's problem. It's an insult to all humanity. So let me start by welcoming the report of the Guttmacher-Lancet Commission, which underscores this enormous toll on the individuals, communities, and economies. It also underlines the steps that we can and must take. As the report highlights, the cost of preventing this unnecessary suffering in our partner countries could be as little as $9 per person per year if we plan and spend well. Moreover, as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation estimated, every dollar spent can save up to $6, which can then be used for housing, sanitation, and other services. So how can we afford not to? The European Union has long supported women's and girls' empowerment and access to sexual and reproductive health and rights. This is reiterated in our second Gender Action Plan and the European Consensus on Development, which includes a commitment to allocate at least 20% of our overall global development assistance to social inclusion and human development. In today's opening ceremony, we presented our Spotlight initiative with the United Nations to help end violence against women and girls. Backed by the European Union's seed money of 500 million euros, it includes a specific focus on sexual and reproductive health and rights in sub-Saharan Africa, in particular for the most vulnerable and marginalized young women. We continuously provide support to sexual and reproductive health and rights through a range of instruments, most notably through our geographic programs on gender, health, and population, as well as through major global initiatives, through UN agencies and civil society. In 2017 alone, we provided 470 million euros for reproductive, maternal, neonatal, and child health. We have allocated 1.5 billion euros until 2020 to our bilateral health programs in partner countries, which include funding for sexual and reproductive health and rights. I want to assure that our commitment to human development and our strong support for sexual and reproductive health and rights remains front and center in our discussions on the future long-term European budget, but also in our short-term programming for the next 3 years in the order of several hundred million euros. I'm committed to doing everything in our power to reach out to all women and girls in a holistic manner to ensure universal access to health and rights. This means using all of the tools, policies, and resources at our disposal, working hand in hand with all partners and across all sectors, including investing in better health, education, social protection, and ensuring universal access to basic services for all. Making sure women and girls have a voice and a choice over their own sexual and reproductive health and rights is a prerequisite for their empowerment in all aspects of daily life, political, social, cultural, and economic. And it's essential for helping us to achieve our global goals of healthy, happy, and prosperous societies and economies. This is why I was determined to make women and girls the focus of this year's European Development Days. And this is why I'm very happy to join you here today. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, I can see the European Union is very committed on that. And now I welcome Caterina Furtado. She's the UNFPA Goodwill Ambassador, who will give us her experiences. She's traveled a lot, I've been told, and seen a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. As a woman, as a European mother, as a citizen of the world, as a TV documentarist, and also as a Goodwill Ambassador for UNFPA since 2000. I'm very happy to see that in 2018, the topic of sexual and reproductive health and rights has made it the center stage here in the form of this session, because this is where it belongs. Unfortunately, and far too long, SRHR have been labeled as a women's issue. But they are the heart of the matter, because they are fundamental to the well-being of humanity without leaving no one behind in action. I live in Portugal, a country that has the lowest rates of maternal and child mortality, where it's safe to be pregnant and it's safe to be born. However, I need to share with you what I saw in countries like Mozambique, East Timor, India, Indonesia, South Sudan, Haiti, where I have experienced the oblivion to which too many women are subjected, either to the lack of reproductive health services or to the simple fact of having been born a woman. And this means a social devaluation in too many families, communities, and official programs. In South Sudan, for example, I saw girls being kidnapped and raped, also by authorities, made sex slaves and begging for food without anyone taking care of them. In Haiti, for example, after the earthquake, I learned the real meaning of UNFPA work in hospitals and services in temporary housing tents. In these two countries, I have seen eye to eye, talking with the population, that even in emergencies and humanitarian contexts, people need SRHR care and resources to be part of health and international cooperation programs, family planning services with contraception, assisted delivery, availability of sanitary towels and hygiene kits, services to support victims of sexual violence, among others. We really need to remember this every single day because people are still there. I saw too many things that I will never forget in my life, and I will tell to the world. In India, I witnessed the school programs that UNFPA developed with young people in 600 schools on gender equality, girls' rights, and life skills. And I remember the hopeful eyes of Gita Narayana, UNFPA coordinator, when she said that addressing issues like menstruation, it's very still sensitive, but that trained teachers and pedagogical activities fit all the contexts of comprehensive sexuality education and identifies the challenges for girls and women. Too many are abandoned or killed. I remember Rika, 14 years old, when she told me in the school library that books are her best friend, and that she had learned there, in the library, in the school, that like boys, she could have dreams, so now she wanted to be a doctor in Paris. And I can't forget what Avinash, a young boy with 16 years old, said to me. He said, boys and girls have the same opportunities. Girls are talented and can beat boys in schools. But he also said to me, marriage should only take place with parents' permission. They know the best woman to marry. Strange, or maybe not, a warning of the long way to go. The good news is we know what to do and how to achieve SRHR for all. It's a political decision, yes it is. It requires firm political will, long-term dedicated investment and engagement by every one of us. Action should be taken both in and beyond the health sector to change laws, policies, and social norms. The key thing is to promote gender equality and give women greater control of their bodies, their lives, their destiny. The AU-UN Spotlight Initiative and She Decides have the potential for global reach, and we need partnerships at government, civil society, community, grassroots, and individual level to move forward. And I'm saying this at a time when the European Union prepares its budget for the next 7 years. For the right to development to be a reality for all, SRHR and respect for women's rights with resources must be part of the equation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Catarina Furtado. And now let me introduce you to the rest of the panel. At the end is Mr. Jens Froelich-Holter. I hope I got that right. He's the State Secretary for the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Norway. And followed by Minister Awa, which I have already introduced. We have Mr. Vlado Milosevic, who's the Member of Parliament of Chile. Thank you for coming. And Ms. Renate Beach, who's the Executive Director of DSW. Basically, it's an organization that focuses on youth empowerment and SRHR. And we have Mr. Hope Jeremiah Ofor. He's the EDD youth leader. I hope you feel comfortable with all the... I'm sure you do. Can we start with Mr. Jans? Let's start with you first. Some countries have given priority to SRHR and some haven't. I believe Norway has given it quite a priority. Can you explain to us about that?
Thank you for that question. It's, in a sense, fairly easy to answer because, I mean, gender equality is crucial for any country, any society. It's a prerequisite for sustainable development. If I were to use the same words as my Prime Minister Erna Solberg did on this stage earlier this morning, she said that discrimination of women and girls belongs on the garbage heap of history, along with slavery and racism. So it's really quite a simple story in a sense. It's not a policy decision, for that matter. It's a question of human rights and a very basic human rights as such. Of course, we welcome this report and are very interested in looking at the recommendation. I've been in this job for 5 months, and the first abbreviation I had to learn was SRHR. A very important abbreviation. It's much easier to say the short version than the long version, but it's been a very key priority in our international engagement and in our development policy for many decades and across various governments, both left-leaning and right-leaning governments of Norway. It's been a key issue. We think also that it's a basic question about holistic, or let's say inclusive development, having gender equality. Norway has experienced this throughout the history. Brave individuals, civil society organizations has for many hundreds of years fought for women's rights. We've included. We've had the suffragette movement. We've had more female participation in the workforce, which has been a tremendous way to empower women, but also a tremendous way to actually improving our economy and growing the Norwegian economy. And
sorry, Mr. Jans, you did mention that it's a key issue in Norway. Can you just mention how? How would a girl feel comfortable to be in Norway and be valued, especially on health?
You know, firstly, we put a very big emphasis on universal health care, having also legalized abortions 40 years ago, or more than 40 years ago now, actually, and we built out our kindergarten system, which at first was seen it was seen as a public expense, but now it's becoming more like a public investment because you enable women to participate in the workforce even more and also empower women in general. So we have a lot of policies in place which helps empower women, and of course our healthcare system is it's very strong, and even though we are often changing governments, it's still quite publicly funded as well. So and just to add, I mean, we're a big player on the international donor field when it comes to healthcare and SRHR. We're hosting the next funding conference for the GFF in November in Oslo, which will be a big thing, hopefully. Of course, I'm a person who loves a good competition, and Norway is now the biggest donor to the GFF, and we hope that we will get some competition and even be beaten in November. That would be quite okay for us.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to Ms. Renate Berg, talking about NGOs and the difficulties that they face. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you very much for providing a stage for raising these issues. However, before I would like to go to the specific of CSO's work in this field, in particular, as Commissioner Mamita, he said sexual reproductive health and rights. And looking at the theme of the whole development days, women and girls at the forefront of sustainable development, for me it's clear that this is an issue. But looking around, it is not. And this is something we should really bring to our attention. It's the same, it's sexual reproductive health and rights. And the second thing I would like to say before is how much I like and I'm happy about the Guttmacher-Lancet study. And I tell you why, because sexual reproductive health and rights, I don't know if everybody knows this sitting in this room, was a kind of invention of the Cairo conference 25 years ago. And one of the main really outcomes was to assure that each and every woman has access to sexual reproductive health in 2015. And we know that's still in 2018 not at all true. And they focus on sexual reproductive health, and the R was a kind of, I would say, neglected. And I think we will never achieve sexual reproductive health if we don't really take the R in the word serious. And this is, I think, something I would really like to say. It's not just an issue of the CSO community, but looking at the CSO community, and sexual reproductive health is always put under the health umbrella kind of hold, so it is not. It is really, it affects so many other areas, social norms, laws, policies, gender issues, and I think that exactly makes it a bit difficult to address. And this also, when you look at the CSO communities, they are not doing all the same. They have different, some are working more in really offering services, others more addressing the demand side. So looking at DSW, we are working, my organization, we are on the one hand really looking on increase of budgets for family planning and also accountability of governments, but on the other hand also to really provide youth information to young people, youth-friendly services, which for us, and I grew up in Germany even, and being a little bit older, it was clear that I got information, that I knew where to go, but that's not at all the reality at the moment at the ground in developing countries. So I think the other thing when it comes to sexual reproductive health and rights, if we really want to achieve this, and this is why CSOs are on the ground, we really need to be very sensitive in terms of, on the one hand, we need to involve traditional chief, religious leaders, nurses, parents, so it makes it a little bit more complicated. It's another issue than in malaria, for example. Just to look, when I look at you, it came into my mind. So I think it's extremely complex, and this is also what makes, for me, the work of CSOs so important in this field of sexual reproductive health and rights, because it can't be, it's not just an issue just of supplies. It needs definitely more. And I know I only have 3 minutes. The work is difficult in terms of the rights issue, and this is, in Germany we can talk about rights. Nobody will close our NGO, our organization, DSW. However, being in other countries where abortion is not legal, or where even sexual orientation is something you can openly talk about it, that is really a challenge, a real challenge. And that's again coming back to what I said. It's complex and it's sensitive, and it needs a lot of work that goes beyond health.
Thank you very much. I think we'll come back to you, especially when you talked about different, it's very difficult, especially compared to different cultures around the world. So what you think is not right to others, it's really okay. Let's go to the Member of Parliament of Chile, Mr. Vlado Milosevic. You're a Member of Parliament. How easy is it to defend SRHR in parliaments? Standing there and talking about girls and women and their rights. How easy is that?
Bueno, muchas gracias por la...
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here today, and I'd like to thank the organizers of this event. I come from Chile, which is a country where in the last couple of decades have actually seen some good development in economic terms, and also we've had success in combating poverty in recent decades. But the development of the world, or this path of development, has not really been reflected in the same way as for women. We haven't seen equal treatment for women. So we see in Chile, and if you look at the rankings for Chile, you will see that there's one figure which is important for me and for many of us in the parliament. We're very concerned because we see that we're one of the 7 countries in the world where we have no access to abortion. This is really a black point for women's reproductive right, and I think it shows that this legislation is very, very macho, because the legislation has been drafted by men, and it should have actually been changed some time ago. But just last year, after 30 years of debate, we were able to actually reach legislation to allow abortion in 3 cases. One is if the mother's life is in danger. A second cause would be because of the fetus not being a viable fetus, and a third is actually for example, rape of young pregnancies, which is extremely common in Chile. Now, this is very important because in Chile we never had a proper debate about reproductive rights for women in our society and sexual rights for women. This is a country which is very conservative, which is changing a lot, of course, but it still is a country in a very conservative region of the world. And so the legislation which finally got through Parliament, and which is actually a baby step, is legislation which will enable us to have a more in-depth discussion on these rights for women. Today in my country, I'm very pleased because we've seen a huge social movement of feminism, which has been led by women in universities, calling for equal treatment, not just for sexual education or reproductive health, but also in general. And this is a new stage for Chile. We haven't seen this in the past.
Thank you very much. And now let's go to the youth, because we know the youth are very important these days. So, Ofor, you deal with your fellow youth, yeah? How important is SRHR to your community?
Okay, thank you very much. For every hour we're seated here at EDD, 4 girls in Nigeria are dying trying to procure unsafe abortion. In my country, Nigeria, we lose about 96 girls daily who die trying to procure an abortion. I know one of them. Her name was Martha. Martha was the brightest person in my class. Martha was my best friend. After some time, Martha stopped coming to school. Then I was in secondary school. My friend Martha died trying to procure unsafe abortion. I've worked with women and girls for the past 5 years. Concerning their health. I'm a biomedical scientist in Nigeria. And I've come to realize that the lives of women and girls are complex, varied, and intersectional, with their sexual and reproductive health and rights running into every other aspect of their life. The freedom to make decisions if and when they want to get married, if and when they want to have kids, if they want to keep a pregnancy or if they do not want to keep a pregnancy. They should be able to make this decision free from coercion, discrimination, judgment, and free from violence. In that way, we're truly empowering women and girls, not just economically giving out seed funds to them to start businesses. What if they start businesses and they come down with a pregnancy they didn't plan for? The business goes into jeopardy. Funds have been lost. Talking about how it affects the community. When a girl comes down with pregnancy, when she comes down with a challenge related to SRHR, when it isn't planned for, she can't continue with her education. Our educational attainment is being stopped halfway. And in fact, SRHR is the bedrock for gender equality. And until we are able to realize and fulfill and protect the sexual and reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health of every woman and girl, gender equality by 2030 will be a big one for us to be able to achieve.
But, Ofor, do you think they're old enough to decide?
Okay. Pretty much the work I do in Nigeria with the Planned Parenthood Federation of Nigeria is to offer young people, especially girls and young women, with age-appropriate and culturally sensitive comprehensive sexuality education. This helps them make informed decisions about their health, about their bodies. I've been able to, for the pilot program we carried out for 6 months, we've been able to reach over 2,000 marginalized girls living at internally displaced person camps in Nigeria. You all know of the Boko Haram issues in Nigeria. People are being displaced from their communities and they have to live at IDP camp. And during humanitarian settings, the need for comprehensive sexual and reproductive health education and services is much more higher. So we've been able to provide these girls comprehensive sexuality education, and now they can make informed health about their bodies. They can negotiate contraceptive usage with their partners. And we did this having a gender-based approach on these issues. So girls, through this comprehensive sexuality education, they can make decisions that really makes them equal to their male counterparts. So comprehensive sexuality education is a tool that we can use in empowering girls and young women to make informed decisions. Most times we talk about SRHR supplies, contraceptives, and the rest. But if this target group do not have the required knowledge, they do not have the required information to seek these services, the supplies will be there. The supplies will be there. So giving them access to comprehensive sexuality education empowers them to make informed decisions, and it really helps them decide. She decides.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ofor, if I go back to Minister Awa, according to the report, most part of the SRHR would only cost $9 per capita. Is that really possible? Particularly for contraception, maternal and newborn health, together with self-abortion care.
In fact, when we look at financing, we need to know how much it will be. And it is why studies has been done to show that if we want to put the range of possibilities for reproductive health, when we look at antenatal care, etc., all these things and contraceptions, health structure for women to go when they need it, etc., all this will be $9 per person. And we know that we have already we put on budget for all the issue of care. When we look at the figures, we will say $9 is maybe not a good number because it's so small. But in fact, and it is why I like what the gentleman just said, the issue will be more to look at laws, to look at reforms, to look at commitment of parliamentarians, commitment of government, strong civil society. All this don't need also a lot of money. It's more commitment. But for the money to have good structure for people to have access and all the medications, it is $9. It is what is coming from this study. And I think that This will show to people that it is not only an issue of money, it's also an issue of commitment and to fight to ensure that what we are saying is translated into actions.
What do you think is stopping those actors to commit?
If you look at the document also, we raise the issue of social barriers, issue of, we didn't put it, but we can have the religious barriers. We have also what the thinking of people, you know, we think that this is not good for girls, this is not good for the boys, we need to wait for, etc. All these are just beliefs. And it is necessary to discuss and to put all this at community level and really put the issue with clear scientific element for people to understand. People at community level will tell you, we want it, we want contraception, but this will be not their role, because their role is to know that they have options. But governments particularly need to put in place the structure and the product necessary. And I would like to give you two examples. The first one is from my own country, but I think that all the countries are now pushing a lot for in reproductive health to contraception. And this is more a commitment to say we agree that women need to have access and girls also to contraception. And in Senegal, we have been able in 2-3 years to double the prevalence of coverage for contraception, just because the leadership decided that this needs to be put on our agenda, and we need to put in place all the elements for women to have access. It's not enough, because we went from almost 10%, and now we are almost at 25-30%. It's a long way to go, but at least we are showing that it is possible. The other example of political will or engagement is that more in a lot of countries now, universal health coverage is becoming what is driving health in our countries. Now, why not putting all this element of reproductive health as a right to put it in universal health coverage, and not to look at all the issue, not the issue of reproductive health, contraception, access to care and for girls and for women. All this can be strengthened with a very strong universal health coverage strategy and policy in countries.
Thank you very much. If I go to Mr. Milosevic, he's a parliamentarian, and you've heard what Minister Awa has just said about commitment. Do you think you do enough in committing to these kind of issues of girls and women as a parliamentarian?
Bueno, creo que hay que partir haciendo.
I think we should start by referring to the report, which has given us some very useful information, but also some very alarming information, in particular in section 5 of the report. According to the report, contraceptive policy is the most effective policy and the most viable in financial terms. When the study was carried out in 2017, this would have avoided many undesired pregnancies in developing countries. It would have led to a reduction in abortion from 48 million down to 12 million. And it could have reduced maternal mortality as well. So that shows, well, those figures show how important it is to commit to policy on contraception. And we should do this without any religious restrictions in particular. We should take up this policy, and the report highlights budgetary shortages, the lack of a budget for contraception policy in developing countries. $6 billion are invested in this policy, but we should really be investing twice that much to address the problem. Many hundreds of millions of women do not have access to contraception at the moment. And this is the kind of commitments that we need to take up as parliamentarians. We should make the governments in office accountable, responsible, so that they can assume responsibility for policy in our countries. In my country, very little was said about this until just a couple of years ago. There was no real discussion, but following the introduction of the abortion law, a huge debate was opened up, and the parliamentarians, the members of parliament, have a role to play. We now have a more conservative government, of course, but it's our duty as MPs to make sure that the government implements the policy adopted by the previous government. And hopefully, with organised society, we can monitor the situation to make sure that the government meets its commitments in administrative terms, in regulatory terms, and in budgetary terms. There's always a temptation to try and reduce those obligations.
A little bit when I said I'll ask you about culture. You've heard Minister Awa talking about contraception. Even Ofor also talked about contraception and the decision to self-abort. It comes to you, Ms. Renate. I think about the difference of culture. Maybe it's easier for developed countries to convince people to use contraception, to convince girls. But maybe in Africa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it might be difficult to convince them to use contraception or safe abortion because of stigma. I don't know whether you've dealt with things like that.
Yes, sure, partly because we are working with young people, and they definitely grow up in rural areas, which is definitely also a huge difference to urban areas. As I already mentioned, this issue of, I would call it social norms, is an issue. However, you definitely need, it's not a rational argument. It is something which you need to address, addressing the human needs and the health issue as such. And what we experience is and that's why we always also integrate parents and teachers as a whole, just looking at the future of the girls and doing the best for a child, because I think that is a very nature. Each parent wants the best for your child. And so in this regard, I think the culture issue is something that definitely can't be addressed by billboards. It's something by discussion, and that's why it's really important to have a comprehensive approach as such, I would say.
Thank you. Ofor, as a young chap, if you, for instance, you convince your fellow young ones that you should use contraception, don't you feel like, in a way, it's encouraged them to have sex while they're very young?
Okay, thank you. That's a misconception, and it's pretty one of the major misconceptions we have about related to sexual and reproductive health and rights for young people in Africa. Most times you go to, for my work, we'll go to communities, we'll go to schools and want to talk about comprehensive sexuality education, and they're like, no, you're going to make these girls promiscuous, you're going to make them wanting to start having sex. But data and statistics have shown us that abstinence-only sexuality education is one of the drivers of promiscuity in young people. Because when you make it comprehensive, you tell it all to them. Sometimes I go for my work and I go into these communities, I go with condoms, and they're like, no, you're not allowed to show these girls condoms. But these girls are already having sex. That is the fact. So we're very, Africa is pretty much a conservative society. We really don't want to address the truth. But these girls are already having sex. Why are they getting pregnant? Or who does? How do they get pregnant? I don't think whatever happened in the Bible is happening around this time around. Who gets them pregnant? Abortion is happening. Africa has one of the highest rates of teenage pregnancy. In my country, 1 in 10 girls in northern Nigeria is vulnerable to becoming pregnant before the age of 18. 1 in 12 girls in the south is vulnerable to becoming pregnant. But we shy away from it because we have this misconception. But I think one reason for this misconception, there are a myriad of reasons, is a complex issue. We have religious views concerning this. We are Christians and we want to tell our girls to remain virgins until marriage. That is an ideal. It's not something that is really, that could be possible for them. That's why we talk about sexual rights. This, we want them, I really want young people to know that there's something called sexual rights, but there's something, again, arming them with the right informations. They should know, yes, this is a right for them, they have what we call sexual rights, but arming them with the right informations. Because if we don't arm them with the right informations, they will get the informations from the net, they will get it from MTV, they will get it from their friends, and most times it isn't comprehensive. It isn't comprehensive. So that's a misconception that my organization, PPFN, is trying to break down in Nigeria, and it's something that involves a multi-sectoral approach. It's not something you can go alone and do. You need to involve, as Madam said, you need to involve the religious leaders, and that's something we're working on. You need to involve traditional leaders. You need all sectors to be on ground to be able to enable, dispel this misconception that giving young people access to sexual and reproductive health education and services is going to make them promiscuous. It is unfounded, and it is the reverse, rather. It's almost the same thing for abortion. I should talk about abortion right now. I'm for the stance that abortion should be decriminalized in Africa because when abortion is pretty is illegal in my country, you only get an abortion when the fetus poses threat to the life of the mother, or the lady has been raped, or the fetus has some deformities. That are the only reasons a woman is allowed to have abortion in my country, Nigeria. But yes, the abortion is going on. You tell these women they can't access abortion at the clinic, but they will always find a way to get this abortion done. And most times it is dangerous. I don't want to go into the methods they go into to get abortion. And most times it's dangerous. If they don't die, they are permanently damaged reproductively for life. So, but you see in Western countries where abortion is legalized, there's even lower rate of abortion. It's a fact. Statistics are there to back me up. In countries where abortion is legalized, there are lower deaths due to abortion, and there are even lower rates of abortion than in countries where it is illegal. So, for a woman to be able to fulfill sexual and reproductive rights, I think African leaders should start thinking about decriminalizing abortion in the long term. We should think about decriminalizing abortion and making packages whereby young people can really learn. Sex wasn't taught to me in secondary school. I'm 23 years old, and until now, but my parents don't want to even talk sex with me. They just tell me, hope you aren't having sex already. And to my sisters, they are like, if you get pregnant, you are going to stop school. I will pour you acid. I will do this to you. You cannot bring dishonor to the family. I don't want to go up into northern Nigeria where they are being stoned to death. I've read stories and I've seen documentaries of girls in northern Nigeria being stoned to death just because of a silly mistake. And I don't think it's a mistake on the part. The system failed them. The system failed them by not giving them the right information to make informed decisions. So it's pretty much a reason of we have a lot of misconception in Africa, and it's going to take us some time, but persistent advocacy and a multi-sectoral approach is going to get us there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ofor. Now we can go back to the audience while we're still continuing with a couple of questions. You can now send the same EDD app. I'm sure you still have it handy, and start sending questions. Any questions you want to direct to our panelists here, please feel free. And we can also do it the old-fashioned way, just raise your hand and then you can ask a question. I think that's better. Sometimes technology can be very tricky. Anybody who wants to ask a question, or you're thinking about it? Okay. Let me go to Minister Awa while somebody's thinking for oh, we have somebody there already. Please. Do you have a mic? Yes, thank you. Can you just introduce your name and a quick question, please?
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you so much. My name is Francina, and I come from the Republic of Congo. I'm also an EDD young leader. My question goes to the lovely women on our panel. I'm an activist for reproductive justice, and it's a field that I'm very passionate about for personal reasons, and of course for reasons that statistics tell us about. I would like to know, in terms of advocacy, what has been your experience working hand in hand with governments to ensure that women's rights and women's health are respected in your countries? Thank you.
All right, so that question goes to both women. That's what you wanted, right? Okay, can we take another 2 questions? Another 2 questions. There's a lady here. Men are allowed to ask questions as well, so don't be shy.
Hi, my name's Olivia. I work with the International HIV/AIDS Alliance. We are very excited about the Guttmacher-Lancet report. One of my colleagues was on the advisory panel of it. And one of the things that we value is that it makes a much more seamless connection between HIV and other forms of sexual and reproductive rights. And there's other newer aspects that it brings to the table as well. For example, it looks at other sexually transmitted infections that weren't traditionally included. It has an emphasis on gender-based violence, and it's really looking at sexual and reproductive health rights for everybody, regardless of their sexual and gender orientation. So that's quite a novel element that it's been quite explicit about. So I'm quite interested to know, particularly for Renate, what you think DSW will do differently as a result of the report, and what you would like to see some of the main players do differently as a result of the report.
One more.
Yeah. Okay, one more. Or shall I respond?
1 second. There's one last question, and then you'll start the response. Somebody here asked, to you again. SRHR is often politicized. What can donors do to support the broader agenda? It's a bit similar with the recent question.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the questions. There were several. I would like to start with your question and coming back. So what will DSW do differently based now on the results? Honestly, this question I haven't seriously thought through. It is more a confirmation of what we do, and now we have exactly this report which we can refer to. Because DSW already some years ago, for example, when we did our strategic plan review, we included a particular goal on gender equality, which definitely was, I also think, thinking back when the whole sexual and reproductive health agenda was promoted, was a little bit neglected. And I still remember there were the women's movement, the gender movement, and the sexual reproductive health and rights movement, and they are running next to each other but not together. So this is an issue, and the same as the violence. But we already integrated these components in our strategy. So it's more that will be not a change, but now we have a kind of proof of evidence, which we all know that, as I said, ratio and rationality is not always a driver of political decisions. Unfortunately, look at Mr. Trump. Here, we definitely, that's very helpful for us, and that's why I said in the beginning, I'm so glad that we now have this report. The HIV/AIDS aspect, from my perspective, and we still focus highly on this aspect, because I also feel at the moment it's a bit neglected. It's in terms of that people think, okay, the HIV/AIDS rates are going down. Now there is a lot of treatment available. It's increased. Okay, and I'm afraid that once we lose exactly the energy on emphasizing this and also making clear that it is a sexual and reproductive health and rights issues, not only, but to a very high extent. So this is, so DSW still has HIV/AIDS prevention high on the agenda. And I don't know, the question that came from over there, yeah, I think I partly maybe already answered this question in terms of the importance, but I think your question went more into the direction, what is our experience? It's a little bit difficult to say. We are working also in, because our focus of DSW is our Eastern African countries, and not only in Germany and here in Brussels, we try to really link up with parliamentarians, because I do see they have they really have a role which CSOs can't play, so we really need to play our role. We try, and we always find parliamentarians also in those countries. So we try to support, to raise a voice, also their voice when it comes to gender issues and women's issues. So again, I'm starting to repeating myself, but we really need to take small steps, and it needs to start from community level. It can't come from above. Look at all the laws. Look at the age of marriage. It's all countries now have more or less 18 years as the age of marriage, but we all know that a lot of marriages takes place with for young girls age 13, 14. So it needs the community, it needs the people, and this takes time, and it needs really involvement, discussion, and yeah, this is my experience. In particular, gender is definitely something when I refer to social norms and societies and religion. And so what we do, and then the last sentence, because even the Catholic Church, last week there was a research institute from the Catholic Church, and they really try to find good arguments or to find a way into the official Catholic Church to introduce family planning, sexual and reproductive health. I don't know to what extent the rights issue, but this is really all movements that are very, very important. Also working with religious leaders is so crucial, because they definitely setting the ground for more.
Thank you very much. I have another question from Anonymous, but it goes to Mr. Michosevic and Minister Awa. So I think, Mr. Michosevic, you can start with that. They're asking, how can you bridge the gap between political parties and reach a broader consensus on SRHR?
Bueno,
well, I think that our experience in Chile is of a country which during the 60s and 70s we had a debate on family planning, and but then later on, after we became fully democratic, then there really was a step backwards. We saw a greater influence from the Catholic Church upon society, and I think that ended up permeating the whole of the political system in the country. And then, with the return to democracy, we saw that the majority of our democratic parties in Chile did not want to continue with this debate on the laic society or its fundamental questions. It was very difficult to get this debate up and going. So there was a great gap between the feelings of the political class and the ideas that were more frequent in the popular opinion. But then, of course, when we had this debate now on depenalizing abortion, then that led to more surveys where we saw that the majority of Chileans were in favor of abortion, and 70 to 80% of the population were in favor, depending on some of the surveys. But the Catholic population also supported the abortion liberalization, but the political classes still keep their distance even today. So I think that what we've seen is that we've seen that there's been great pressure from society, from civil society, from organised society. They've put this matter on the agenda now. And secondly, I think that also the President, Michelle Bachelet, was also very concerned to actually have this debate. She had a personal commitment to actually pushing this agenda of gender rights and reproductive rights, and she really was behind it. So the political parties, the socialist parties included, had a campaign which forgot really about this element of society, but under the pressure of the president and organized society in Chile, they ended up actually reforming the legislation.
Minister Awa, you're a minister, in fact, so how do you deal with that? 1 minute you're a minister, the second you're a woman.
I would like just to start by saying that I have been involved in women movement a long time ago. It was not when I was part of the government and things like that. And what we were fighting a lot to have women empower, but also be part of the decision-making process. And finally, in Senegal now, in Parliament, we have a law, gender sensitive, with half men and half women in the Parliament. I know that in Rwanda they have done something like that. But I think that this also put on the table more issues related to women, because they are there and they can fight on votes and things like that. It's not that they are all with some of the proposal we are pushing, but almost they understand and they have been victims, or they know what is the real life, and they can push more on this agenda. So this is also important, to have women in the decision-maker position to be able to change things. But we need also a lot of men like you, very important, to have them also on board. It's not only a woman issue, but a gender issue. The second thing I wanted to say is that we have sometimes a sort of platform between parties. All parties cannot agree on the whole range of sexual and reproductive health and rights. We can have a minimum platform, for example, where all the politicians, everybody, will be supporting. And this is also, in some countries, they have been able to do things step by step, by starting by a minimum platform and after adding others. I can tell you that in countries like mine, where, like in Nigeria, abortion is not permitted, only for medical reasons, women groups where I am, we have been pushing a lot, at least to have abortion when you have rape and incest. But these two didn't go through. It is why we need to know that all countries are not the same. This is one of my messages. We cannot just decide that because in Chile we have this, we will have it in Senegal or Nigeria or Tanzania. We have different reality. We need to look at it seriously and see. You can have your own beliefs, but if we want everybody in your country or the majority to come with you, sometimes you need to go step by step to ensure that you are not creating more problems than ever. Because sometimes, by putting it so blunt, it can be counterproductive. This is something a lot of people disagree, because they say, no, 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 it's human rights. But when you want to do human rights where, in a country where it is too much Catholics or too much Muslim or too much, you need to be careful, and you need really to see what you can have. And we have been working a lot with religious leaders in Senegal. And they are one of our allies when we are looking at reproductive health. Now themselves, particularly the Muslims, they can go with what is written in Quran, where we can have it, we can do this, we can do that. And with them, we have been able to change a lot of things in Senegal. But sometimes also, you have some extremists who say, no, no, no. But we have at least some of them with us to fight and to do our advocacy, etc. The last point, what we have done also for in our life and as experience, I am a doctor and I have been working a lot with the Doctor Association of Women, and a lot of point or domain of reproductive health and rights has been really taken into account by themselves and put forward with a lot of advocacy on that. But also with women lawyers going in the rural area or going in some suburb where you don't have really possibility of having people supported by lawyers or have some clarification from lawyers. And these women lawyers, we are working with them, and they are going everywhere to try to explain to women their rights and what they can do. So these are a lot of strategies, not all relevant for people who think that you need just to go in and do some a lot of strong noise. We are working at community level, and I think that it is where we will have community competencies, and these people are able to change life. They are able to change behavior. And it is coming from the grassroots, coming up, supported now by some politicians, but they need to be there. If they are not there, it will be more things done up there without the community and the people to be part of the fights. So this is our experience.
Thank you very much. Just one last question for Mr. Ofor. What could be your recommendations to governments to make sure youth needs are taken into account?
Okay, thank you very much. A lot of this goes to policy making. The government, the legislation, the policymakers should try and make policies that favor and improve the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women and girls. There are a lot of restrictive laws, there are a lot of norms that, political laws that will really limit women from fulfilling and achieving sexual and reproductive health and rights. So government and lawmakers should see that these restrictive laws are losing the beat or become flexible enough for these women to be able to fulfill their sexual reproductive health and rights. And another thing I think is funding. GGRO has really is really succeeding in receding the progress we've made in Africa concerning sexual and reproductive health and rights. By the GGRO, I made the global gag rule from the United States. The United States is one of the biggest funders of funding agency that funds SRHR interventions in Africa. It's an opportunity for the EU. Though the EU is a major funder, the EU is a major funder, but it's an opportunity for the EU to step up our funding and for other funding organizations to step up funding. And I want to also use this opportunity to call on on CSO. They should try and move from being youth-focused to becoming youth-centered organization. Young people should be included in your policy making. Young people should be included when you're planning your programs. We shouldn't just be called upon during implementation. We should be included when you're drafting your programs, because we best know what happens at battles, and we're best to give solutions. And we are no longer the leaders of tomorrow, we are leaders of today, and we deserve a seat at the decision-making table.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Ofor. And I wish we had more time, but we don't. So just to wrap it up, we were discussing about no health without rights. Women and girls decide. Just to recap some of the points, we need to address social and economic barriers to take action, secure sustainable finances. Everyone needs to be involved. I'm sure you heard everybody has been insisting on that. It always seems it's women issues, but it's the heart to men as well. We need partnerships to move forward with CSOs, governments, etc. We need commitment of parliamentarians, governments, parents, teachers, you name it. We also, the other thing that was said, women should be part of decision making. Each country has its own way of rights. Not all countries can have the same rights as we've discussed. Policymakers should make policies which are favorable, especially for the young, and young people should be included in policymaking, and EU should step up in funding. I would like to say thank you very much for all the panelists. Just to recap their names again, in case you forgot some of their names. Minister Awa Marie Kolsek, who's the Minister of State, Republic of Senegal. We also had Mr. Vlado Michesovic, Member of the Parliament of Chile. Ms. Renate Beach, Executive Director of DSW. And EDD Youth Leader, Mr. Hope Jeremiah Ofor. But just to remind you, we had the European Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development, Nevin Mamita, and Ms. Katarina Furtado, who's the UNFPA Goodwill Ambassador. Thank you very much for being with us.